Let's talk about aging. We're all trying to do it gracefully, but those fine lines and wrinkles seem to have a mind of their own. Barefaced retinol skin therapy is my go to. It uses retinol clinically proven to boost collagen, smooth fine lines, and to speed up cell turnover. And unlike other retinoids I've tried, this one doesn't irritate my skin, so I can use it consistently, which is key. If you're looking for one powerful product to support your skin as it ages, Barefaced Retinol Skin Therapy is it. Use code MOMMA15 for 15% off your first order at barefaced.com. That's MOMMA 15. My health and wellness routine just got a whole lot easier. Gulp Vitamins has been a game changer for me with customized supplements based on my personal health targets. After going online and participating in their simple but thorough health survey, Gulp Vitamins customized a multivitamin just for me. Instead of lots of bottles of various supplements in my cabinet, I now take 4 vitamins in the morning and 4 in the evening that address my specific concerns such as stress, immunity, and sleep. It's customized, it's easy, and less expensive than purchasing a bunch of different supplements. I'm excited for you to try Gulp Vitamins, and you can get 50% off to get started when you use the code MOMMA50 at gulpvitamins.com. That's MOMMA50 at gulpvitamins.com. Well, this week I am joined by a voice that has been a companion to millions during quiet nights and long drives. Radio icon Delilah is our guest this week. You probably know her as the soothing presence behind the nationally syndicated show Delilah, but behind that comforting voice is a woman whose life is nothing short of extraordinary. Delilah is the mother of 15, yes, 15, and a passionate advocate for foster care and adoption. A woman whose faith and resilience have carried her through unimaginable heartbreak, including the loss of 2 of her sons. Whether you've grown up hearing her on the radio like me, or maybe you're being introduced to her story for the first time, I think you'll find Delilah's journey inspiring. Let's jump in.
I'm ready.
Delilah, we have a mutual friend in Aaron Chrysler, who I know has worked with you for so long, and I just appreciate him for setting up this interview I've been wanting to do for a while.
He's awesome. He's awesome.
I think you're in Oregon today, correct?
I am. I'm talking to you in my barn. It's our living space, my workspace, my studios. We live in the barn now. The house on the property is much too small.
So how many kids are still at home, Delilah?
So I was down to 2. I saw light at the end of the tunnel. I was down to only 2 left at home. But about 8 weeks ago, there was a crisis in our family, and I got custody of 3 of my grandkids. The judge awarded me custody.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, 5.
Okay. So now you're back up. So that number, I bet it has fluctuated quite a bit over the years because
Yeah.
they all
Oh, yeah.
come back at some point, right?
The only time it's ever been the same number, I can't even say that. I was going to say is when my firstborn, I had just 1, but I had his half brother and sister. His father had 2 kids when I met him, and I had them after we separated and divorced. I kept his kids for a time.
Oh my
So
goodness.
even then it was kind of fluid.
Yeah, yeah. So how many grandkids? And then I know I always think of you like as a mother of 13, but I think you've added a couple to the bunch in the last few years.
I have technically 15 kids and 5 stepkids, but I've had at least a dozen or 2 dozen foster kids that still are my kids. So even though they were never legally adopted, they're still a part of the family. 23 grandkids and a great granddaughter.
I was thinking about the correlation of, I mean, obviously mothering is a huge part of your identity and what you do. And, the biggest trait to have as a mother is to be nurturing. But I was thinking about how that applies to what you do for a career. You are nurturing people every night on the radio by what you do and providing, encouragement and that listening ear. And a lot of what you do really correlates to being a mother.
Yeah, I'm mom, my listeners. I'm mom to a lot of listeners, and it blows me away. Like when I put a post on social media on Instagram or TikTok, how many people will write and say, "You were the only kind voice I heard in my household growing up," or, my mom passed away, and I would lay there in bed and pretend you were my mom. I don't mean like one or two, I mean like dozens of people feel that connection to my it's who I've always been, it's who I will always be.
Yeah. Did you grow up as a little girl, like wanting to be a mom, like playing
It's
with
all I
dolls?
wanted.
You
All I
all
wanted.
wanted.
I
Wow.
wanted to be Miss America and be a mom.
I
That
wanted
was
to is not bad.
yeah, I wanted to I mean, I was the one that was stealing the chickens from under the hen, to bring them in the house to take care of baby chicks when I was 4, 5, 6 years old. It's what I do. It's who I am.
Yeah.
It's in
Let's
my
go back
DNA.
to how you started out in radio. And I have a little story of how a speech contest in high school inspired me to go into television broadcasting. And, it was somebody coming along and saying, "Hey, you're pretty good at that." And I was thinking when I read your story, I'm like, that's a little bit of, you won a speech contest when you were in high school, right?
Yeah, junior high. Junior high. I tell people I was born with a show off gene. I just wasn't born with any talent. So when you are a natural show off, when you want to be, the center of attention all the time, but you can't sing. I can't sing. I can't dance. And I mean, I've tried. I've had professional vocal coaches try to work with me, and they're like, just find one note and stay with it. Can you just find one and stay with it? I can't dribble a basketball. I'm tall. I'm 5'10". Can't shoot a ball to save my life. Can't running down the court and dribbling simultaneously. Never ever gonna happen. So it was pretty awesome that they had this speech contest, because that's something I can do.
Yeah. Do you remember like what your speech was on? Like, what did you talk about?
70 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this nation a new continent, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal.
So, I mean, you remember the speech and even the intonation and how it was delivered. That was really good.
Well, that's not how I delivered it then. It was 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth upon this nation, continent, a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that
So, from that, what was the first opportunity you had to have a microphone in front of your face and be on the airwaves?
that week, the men that were the judges of the contest are two brothers named Jerome Carnegie and his little brother Steve Carnegie. They had bought the local radio station in Reedsport a few years before. And so they came up to my mom afterwards and said, "Man, your daughter really likes to talk." And my mother was like, "I know, we can't get her to shut up ever." And they said, "No, Mrs. Luke, this is a really good thing. We own the radio station." So they set up a work study program for me and a couple other kids that were in the speech contest. And we would go to, and my younger sister actually was a part of the same program 4 years later. We would go to the local radio station and record school news and school sports. And actually, I had gone to the station prior to that, like 2 years before, in with our Girl Scout troop. We took a little field trip there, and other kids were hanging pictures of basketball players or Farrah Fawcett on their walls at home. I had the newsprint from the AP wire. I had reams of it. I talked him into giving me like a whole box
Like
of
used
newsprint.
news copy?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I practiced doing newscast and sportscast into a little cassette player. So I was ready. I mean,
You
I
were.
was ready.
Yeah.
I still couldn't pronounce Martina Navratilova. She was a big name back then, but I was ready.
I can remember my father receiving Newsweek magazine, and I would get that magazine and go get by myself and read it out loud and
Out loud.
pretend that I was a news
And did you use
broadcaster.
that hairbrush?
Absolutely, yes, to read
Yeah.
the news and to sing, which I couldn't do either. So I get it for
It's
sure.
a good thing you had one out of two.
Yeah, exactly. There you go.
Yeah.
That worked. So I want to know a little bit more about kind of how the format and how you truly became, love songs with Delilah. Like what was that transition? Because getting your own show is a really big deal. And then becoming this household name and having this iconic format that had never been done before. I want to hear more about that.
Um I did a lot of different formats because I got fired, Jennifer, every like 2 years. The first 10 years of my career. Um, so I did oldies, I did rock and roll. I love doing rock and roll.
Was that your
70s
favorite
rock.
genre?
That was 1978. Summer of 78, I was on a rock station. And the rock music in 1978 was the best music ever written and produced in our
It's still
nation.
to this day. I think about yacht rock and how popular it is and how it's always in the car for us on road trips.
Doobie Brothers, nothing better. Strawberry Letter came out that summer. The Eagles, oh my God, there was just so much great music. So I did that in the summer, and then school started in the fall, and I wanted to go to college. I had some scholarships. So I moved to Eugene, and I was only off the air maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and I couldn't stand it. I'd already been on the air for like 4 years.
Yeah.
So I had to find a station. So I worked in Eugene. I worked all different formats. I moved to Seattle in 3 years and got a job at a country western station. I did traffic reports from an airplane for a year.
Oh, wow.
I did jazz for a couple of months. Hated that. Hated.
You can't sing along to jazz, that's why.
Yeah, yeah, and you can't pronounce any of the names.
Yeah.
The Deo Watanabe. So I had worked a lot of formats, but the thing that I loved most at any station I was at was interacting with my listeners. I loved talking to people.
This spring weather has Tucker, our golden retriever, outside a whole lot more than usual. And to keep him fresh, we just sprinkle on Coat Defense's daily preventative powder. I'm so glad we found this product because it has almost completely eliminated any odor and acts like a dry shampoo, helping to repel dirt from his coat. Unlike a typical deodorant or spray, Coat Defense is all natural, safe, and effective. Tucker's friends at Coat Defense are offering you 15% off to try the Daily Preventative Powder or any of the other awesome products they offer. Just use code MOMMA15 at coatdefense.com.
And they would tell me the most fascinating things. And at the time, I was trying to develop a niche, something that would be mine, that would translate to other stations because I knew I was going to get fired again. I knew that was inevitable. I can't keep my mouth shut, and I couldn't put up with bullshit. Made a proposal to my program director about doing a feature about women's news and women's health news, especially. So that was 1983. And back then, we weren't even allowed to say breast cancer. We had to call it women's cancer.
In the early 80s?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
You couldn't
Wow.
say breast cancer on the air.
Goodness, I've never even thought about that. Wow.
Crazy.
We come a long way, haven't we?
Crazy. Yeah, well, too bad we haven't come a long way in curing it.
Yeah, no kidding.
So I did a proposal. Let me talk about women's health issues. Let me do a feature, a daily 3-minute feature about, you know, issues that impact women. I every week I would, not every week, probably every month, give my program director and my general manager a new proposal because I knew I had to do something that would stand out. I couldn't just be a jock. So I proposed that they let me do the proposal was simple. Just let me record my phone calls that I get at night and incorporate them into the show because people are telling me fascinating stories. And I still have the folder in my files someplace. I put it in a little like folder with the 3 rings, that you hand a paper in, a term paper and
Yeah.
and my program director wrote on a sticky note, Dana, my general manager was Dana Horner. Dana, here's another damn proposal from Delilah. What should we do about her? Question mark. And Dana's response was, let her try it. What have we got to lose? Because I was on at night. There was no listeners. There were no ratings. None. We were number 23 in the market at night.
So why not, right?
So why not? So they let me try it for one book, and a book is 4 months long, one ratings period from 10 until midnight. And in the first book, that they just let me incorporate the phone calls on the air. We went from number 23 to like number 12.
Big jump.
And then I said, let me pick out songs that go with the story. We have all these, I mean, back then all of our songs were on vinyl.
Mm.
Everything was vinyl and nothing was pre-programmed. Now everything is pre-programmed.
So were you spinning those yourself as you
Yeah.
crossed to them? You were a one-man band doing all of this.
Yep.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow.
So I'd say, hold on, hold on, hold on. I'd jump up, I'd have to cue up the next record. And then at the time, we were transitioning from records to carts, which looked like 8-track carts, but they
I remember
were
those.
2 tracks. Yeah. So I'd say, hold on, hold on. And I'd have to stack my carts, and I had my baby in the studio with me. So half the time I got a baby nursing, holding him this way with one hand while I'm trying to cue up, and the record players, the 2 turntables were on my right hand side, trying to cue up the turntables and leaning into the microphone like this, trying to keep my baby's head away from the microphone so you couldn't hear him fussing, you know, while I've got a record queued up. Hold on, and hold on, hold on. I'd say to my listeners, hold on. So I'm
Goodness.
recording all my phone calls on a TIAC, reel to reel machine. And then we had to use a razor blade to edit them, a grease pencil and a razor blade. So I'd have to burp the baby, put him down, edit the call, cue up the call on the TIAC while I'm queuing up the record on the turntable, and make it sound like smooth as silk.
Absolutely. And your mind is having to think about what is the right song for this person's scenario, because that was also your sweet spot in
Yeah.
knowing exactly what to play to, speak to that person's situation.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh my goodness. That's such a cool visual though to think about you back in the day doing that.
It was crazy, but it was so much fun. And we were never supposed to have people in the studio at night. So I thought what that really meant is you shouldn't have more than like 20 people in the studio at night. So my best friend Dee Dee, who is my office manager now, we've been friends since we were in 4th grade. She would be hanging out at the studio with me, and she'd say, like, here, give me the baby. So she'd hold the baby while I'm doing this or that or the other. Or I would take a pen and I would put it on the board pointing to which button had to be, like if I was going to segue between 2 records, I'd put it on the board pointing to which button she had to push and fade up the pot to start the next record. So I'd put like a red pin pointing to what she had to press first and a blue pin to what she had to pull the pot down and turn it off so I could go in the bathroom.
Wow, that's
And to this
great.
day, that was 40 years ago. She'll go, just don't forget and screw up. Make sure it's the pin is pointing to the right button.
You alluded to a couple of these earlier, but what are some of the more memorable, impactful stories that you can share of the way that the music and your words have impacted your listeners?
I tell people all the time, and a lot of people think I'm kidding, but I'm not. I'm not kidding at all. I'll come in the studio planning to talk about, X, Y, and Z, get my kid off the bus or whatever. And as I open up the microphone, that'll lay something entirely different on my heart, like out of the blue. I'll feel like, talking about an argument that I had with my ex-husband. I'm just saying, I'm like, wow, where did I wasn't even really thinking about that. And the phone lines will ring and I'll pick it up and somebody will say, you have no idea how I needed to hear what you just said. Or I'll get an email, text message, email, post on social media. You have no idea that you were just speaking to me. How did you know? Or more often than that, I'll be done taking calls because I know how many calls go into each show. It's 5 calls an hour, 5 hours a night. And I'll be done and I'll be spent like, okay, I got nothing left to give. And I'll stop answering the phone lines. And then something will nag me, pick up the line, pick up the line, pick up the line. I'll pick it up. And it'll be somebody in crisis who needs to talk, not even necessarily, in fact, most of the time, not to go on the air, but they just need to know that somebody cares, that somebody in this world. And the truth is, a lot of people care, but they're blinded by pain and they can't see it. you
So true.
know,
Yeah.
when your pain is blinding you, you can't, it's like a deer in the headlights, you can't see the 18-wheeler that's about to mow you down. You can't bolt out of the way. When you're blinded by grief or by betrayal, you can't even see that your best friend is there for you or your kids are there for you. And you just feel alone in that pain. I always say, that wasn't me that picked up this phone. That was God letting you know that He's there.
That's amazing. Have you had the opportunity to be able to, without people, I guess, shaming you for it, to be open about your faith as much as you've wanted to be?
Are you high? No, if I mean, I've been fired for my faith. One time I was fired by my program director. He said, if I hear you say God or Jesus, or I'll pray for you, or anything that indicates your Christian faith one more time on the air, you're done. I need your word that I can trust you in that studio. And I said, I'm giving you my word that the minute somebody calls who needs a prayer, I am going to pray with them. And he said, then I need your headphones. And I said, okay. And I was like, okay, fine. And I walked out and I went into the ladies' restroom and fell down crying.
So hard.
And
Yeah.
I walked out and I'm a hot mess. And my general manager was in the hall and he said, what are you doing? Aren't you on the air like right now? I said, no, I'm not. I just got fired. And he said, what are you talking about? I said, I just got fired. He told me I can't be who I am on the air and wants me to, change who I am on the air. And he goes, he can't fire you. He didn't sign the contract with you. Get back in there and do your show. And I'm like, he's doing my show right now. He goes, all right, let me deal with this. So he walks in, my program director walks out muttering. I go and do the show. And 2 weeks later, I had a new program director.
Oh,
Not because of that, not because of me, but because of there were things going on in his life that was causing a crisis. And I just happened to be, the one annoying him in that moment.
yeah.
Um, and now he's married a beautiful Jewish girl and converted and named their son after the prophet and loves God with all of his heart, which is just so cool how God worked that out.
Oh, I bet. I bet.
But yeah, there have been many, many times I've been in trouble for, and I'm not, I don't go on the air. I don't go on the air and preach or necessarily like, if you listen, you have no idea what denomination or what church I attend or anything. I just want to share God's love. I just want to share God's love and God's light in a very dark and dying world. And that's enough. There are people who've been called to preach and called to share doctrine and blah, blah, blah. I'm not that person. It's like a mom, when you've got a teenager who's in crisis, they don't need you to lecture them. They just need to know that you love them unconditionally and that you are in their corner and you are always going to be on their side. And that's what I try to do.
You talked about taking those calls and getting that nudge from the Lord to pick up the call that maybe when you wanted to walk out the door because you were done with your shift, and how you saw so much purpose in, being able to talk with those listeners. I was curious to know if your listeners, when you went through your own battles with grief and tragedy and loss and divorce, and how did your listeners also help you through the healing
My,
process?
I don't think I would have come back from the loss of my second son um, if it weren't for two factors. I mean, obviously for the Lord, but God used a baby that He brought into my life, a little boy I got custody of just 4 months before Zach left us. And he was in diapers, he was on a bottle, he was barely talking, had been walking for a few months. So I had no choice. I had to get out of bed and, heat up a bottle and make sure he had a dry diaper on. And that's what God used to literally get me out of bed. And I was off the air for a while, but I had to get back in the studio. And, People magazine had done a story about it. So everybody who called most people who called knew what I was going through, and the prayers and the kindness. And there are people to this day, 7 years after we lost Zach, who they'll call me and they say, I pray for you every night. I know it still hurts. I pray for you every night. I'm like, who else in the world has complete strangers praying for them on a daily basis or a weekly basis? Who knows how many of those people's prayers have saved my life, sustained me, given me the courage to keep going on.
That's a special gift. I mean, through with all that you've been through. How did you rely on your faith during that time?
Well, my faith is not, it's not a thing. Like some people talk about their faith the way they talk about their car or their hobby. God is the center of everything in the universe. The world doesn't exist based on scientific principles. Scientific principles exist based on God. We don't stay grounded on this planet because of gravity. Gravity exists because of God. And when you wrap your head around the fact that electrical impulses, harmonics, vibrations, music, everything good comes from this higher power, this amazing being that always has been, is now, and will be forevermore. It's not a thing that you can separate yourself from. It's like I can't separate myself from my lungs. If I have asthma, and if I get a bad cold or pneumonia, can't really separate. I can't like take my lungs out and set them aside and, you know, give them a rest while I go about my day. I can't. You can't separate yourself from God. And when you can, when you think of it as a separate thing, then it's nothing more than a hobby or a philosophy or like an education, a college, whatever. But when you know that you know that you know that I can't make my heart beat, I can't sit here and concentrate and make it stop beating. I can't make it speed up. I mean, I can through exercise or whatever, but I can't control my most simple, basic functions of my body. How do I think for a second I can survive without the Almighty ordering my steps?
Right. There was
So I can't not rely on my faith. I know that I know that I know that everything that exists because of God. And so if something is no longer a part of my life, he has permissioned that. I don't think he has necessarily caused it, but he has permissioned it. And so I have to wrap my head around there's a reason for this. I don't understand it. I may never understand it. I might get a glimpse of it when I get to heaven, but until then, I just have to figure out how to accept it and carry on.
I saw an article and I just thought you talked so beautifully about that, and that plays perfectly into this. But what would you say? I think it's very interesting. How do you encourage a mother not to be so hard on herself? Like how did you finally let go? I mean, you lost two sons, one very tragically with suicide, but how do you not beat yourself up about the what ifs? What could I have done? All of those things. But I just thought you spoke to it in a very encouraging way.
I know that I've done the best that I can 90% of the time. There are times, we're tired and we slack. But I have never once woken up and thought, I don't care about my kids today. I'm going to pleasure myself. I'm going to do whatever I want to do, regardless of how it impacts them. I know addictions cause people to do that, but I've never done that. I did the best that I could. I've always done the best that I can. And even losing Zach, looking back, there are things I would have done differently. He went into a depression and we took him to a doctor that prescribed medicine for him that did not work with his body chemistry. And so he took himself off of it without telling anybody. And 18 days later, he took his life. Once I did the research, I found out that 47% of teenagers who are prescribed this medicine, the most common medicine prescribed for depression, 47% of them have suicidal ideation or attempts after being on it for 6 weeks or more. So there's something I would have done very differently, but I didn't have that information then. And there was no way to have had that information then because it's not common knowledge. You have to dig to find the research. So beating myself up isn't going to bring him back. It's just going to make me ineffective as a mom to the kids that are still here. Having the knowledge that I have definitely will help me make better choices in the future. But beating yourself up never serves a purpose. There's Holy Spirit conviction when you know you've crossed a line or done something that is not in your best interest. But conviction is completely different than guilt. Guilt is crippling and it's poisonous, it's toxic, and it makes you feel dirty and ugly and stupid and less than. And when you know how much God loves you, you know you're not any of those things. You are a precious being, a creation, a one of a kind. You're an on purpose. You're the person he rejoices over with singing. But I always tell my kids, if God had a refrigerator, your picture would be on it. And when you know that you're loved that much, you know that beating yourself up doesn't serve any purpose.
That's definitely inspiring. Tell me a little bit about your foundation, the Point Hope
Point
Foundation.
Hope.
Yes.
Point Hope is my charity. Our motto is to be a voice for forgotten children. Mostly we work in West Africa. We started out 22 years ago working with a population of children that were refugees. And we also work with foster kids in America and really try to bring awareness to the plight of children. We don't want to call them foster kids, but kids who are within the foster care system. A very broken and deplorable system, by the way, but it's what we have. And so we need to work within the context of that to bring awareness and the need for kids to have permanency and to have hope and to have love and to be nurtured and get to try out for a speech contest or basketball games or whatever.
Amen.
So that's what Point Hope is all about.
The you mentioned, the foster children. Did some of is that part of your story with some of the adopted children? Were they in the foster care system? Were you a foster parent and then it led to adoption for you?
No, I did foster to adopt, but
Okay.
well, before I did foster to adopt, I did foster care, but I didn't go, oh, I want to be a foster parent. I had teenage girls that were runaways that were staying with me. And I thought, this is not good. I need some structure here. I can't just have somebody's kid sleeping on my couch. I need structure. So I got licensed as a foster care provider so I could then say, if you're going to stay here, I have to call the foster care system. I have to get this through the proper channels. You can't just couch surf. So that was in my 20s. I got my foster care license.
So that's before you had all three of your biological children, right?
I had one at the time.
Okay.
And then after I had my second biological child, I wanted a third, and I was told I could not have any more children. So I decided to actually, even before I had Shayla, I got licensed again in Massachusetts, but it was always with the intent to foster to adopt. I didn't want a child to come in my life and bond with it and then have them go out of my life. I wanted to adopt. And I got pregnant with Shayla, got married, got pregnant with Shayla. And then we moved back to Seattle. I wanted a third child and was told I couldn't have more children. So I decided to adopt one. That was the game plan, to adopt one.
I wondered if you set out for a smaller number and God had a different plan or what.
Yeah. So the plan was to adopt one. I had two bio, was going to adopt one. Found one through the state. The state placed him with us. It was a great situation. And then found out he had siblings. So set up play dates with them and couldn't couldn't take one without the other. So I got custody of the other two that were also in foster care and adopted them. And while those adoptions were being finalized at almost 40 years old, I found out, surprise, I was pregnant and had Zach. So that was it. I was done. I went from two children to six children in 18 months. And I
Oh my
was
goodness.
done,
And working full
closed.
time the whole
Working
time.
full time. I was the only one supporting them. My ex never had never brought money into the house. We went through a divorce, and while we were going through the divorce, a lovely lady in Pennsylvania named Sarah Dorman, who's worked in the adoption situation for years, helping abortion. There are more Christian girls getting abortions than the normal population, because within the church there is so much shame on unplanned pregnancies that they choose abortion. This was, 25 years ago, which is just atrocious, that instead of being loved and embraced and helped and nurtured, and family and friends coming along and saying, "Oh my gosh, let me help you. Let me bless you. Let me take you in my house. Let me set you up with a crib and a car and offer to watch the kids so you can finish your high school degree or your college diploma." Instead, it's "you're bad, you're sinful, you're horrible," and they choose abortion. So Sarah Dorman had worked in that situation, helping these girls to choose to keep their baby or to place them for adoption. She facilitated that adoption. She took girls into her house. She was just like a mom to everybody. And she reached out to me and she said, "Do you know anyone that wants to adopt a little baby? He's not a newborn, he's a toddler, but the state has gotten involved because of abuse." And I said, "Nope, not me. I'm done. I tapped out, but send me the information and I will go to church and see if there's anybody at church that's got infertility issues or wants a bigger family." And a month and a half later, I adopted TK.
You couldn't resist. Got it attached quickly, I guess.
I fell in love with him just from his picture, and that was that.
Oh my goodness.
And so then I was really sincerely done. I had 7. That was enough. And then I started working in Africa. And I said, "Okay, I will help the whole community, the whole refugee camp at large, not individual people." So Point Hope got a lot of structure. I had a lot of advisors, really smart people working with me, how to build the whole community up, the whole family up, how to help the whole community thrive so that these orphan kids wouldn't be left behind. And I said, "I am not getting attached to a single person, not going to happen, not going to do it." And that lasted for 2 years, 2 years and 8 trips to Africa.
2 years without getting involved individually with a child.
Yeah, I was really proud of myself. Then I pulled up at the camp one day and there was this little street urchin, this little girl waiting at the gates like she'd been waiting all of her life, and our eyes met and I'm like, "No, no, no, no. I know what this means. I know what this means." And sure enough, Blessing just turned 21. So I ended up adopting 6 kids from the refugee camp, and then more here in America that God brought into my life. But it's not like I said, "Okay, I want to adopt more kids." It was a child would end up in my home because, mom passed away or mom's on drugs or whatever. So then I have to go get my foster license renewed so I can then care for them and adopt.
Go through the process. What a big heart you have. Pretty amazing. Yeah.
It's funny. People are like, "Oh, you must love kids." I'm like, "Not really. Like a lot of kids I don't want to be around because they're brats." But my kids, like every one of my kids, I had like a soul connection with right off the bat. Like right off the bat.
Do you think you're done? You thought you were a few other times.
Every time I say I'm done, the Lord's like, "I'll be the one to determine that." Here's the truth though. I am really close with a lot of my friends that I graduated with. We have a really tight knit class. And so I see them every few years. And I'm a hell of a lot younger than they are for the
Your
most
kids are
part,
keeping you young. Yeah.
because I don't have the luxury of slowing down. Like I have to get up at 6 o'clock and get them out the door to school.
Right. Right.
So I can't,
Yeah.
I can't retire and go fishing. It's like
You're still feeding kids and packing school
I
lunches.
and I got to make orthodontist appointments now. So
Exactly. Exactly.
I got one that's on the rally team. So, umpteen times a week, we're going here, going there, going here, going there. I don't have time to say, "I can't do this. I can't." And here's the crazy thing. I have back problems and my back was killing me. I went to see a neurologist. I did this, I did that. And bam, this thing happened in February that I ended up with custody of 3 more little ones.
That was just this year? Oh, yes,
Yeah,
that's the grandchild.
yeah.
Yes.
I have not had to even take an ibuprofen since God brought them. It's like he's saying, okay, I know you're tired. I'm just going to supernaturally touch your spine and heal this little problem here that was going to require major surgery
Wow.
so you can keep going.
Yeah.
So,
And now you're constantly emotional with 3 young ones, so
yeah.
well, tell me just as we wrap up here, and professionally, are there any more like goals you want to hit or things? I mean, the Radio Hall of Fame, the NAB Broadcasters Hall of Fame, I mean, amazing accomplishments and the list of accolades go on and on. You must be so proud of those. I just was kind of curious if there was anything that you're looking toward, maybe another milestone.
God has made every professional dream I ever had come true times 1,000. But I am signing a long-term contract because my youngest is 9. So I've got to work at least 9 more years to get him through high school. And so I am signing a long-term contract with Premier Radio Network. So I'll be around for a long time.
And all the listeners just cheered and got super excited to hear that. So they're not going to have to worry about you retiring anytime soon.
No, not anytime soon, but I love it. I love coming in, and it's my happy place.
What's
I
your
get to
recording schedule look like? What does your day look like?
I live all day, take care of the kids, take care of the animals. I just hatched a baby gosling this week. I got 22 eggs, chicken eggs in the incubator right now. So I take care of the farm during the day, and then I fix dinner for the kids. And then I have a nanny now. I just hired her 2 weeks ago that comes in at night and helps them with homework and make sure they do the dinner dishes after I cook dinner while I'm here in the studio working. And then she gets them in the tub and into bed for me. And the 2 older kids get to stay up, and then they come down and hang out with me in the studio most of the nights for an hour or two.
And you're still recording how many hours in the evening?
5 hours,
5 hours.
5 hours, 5 days a week. And then a lot of times I knock off on Fridays, but then I work on Sunday nights to take enough calls that I can, stay ahead of the game.
Yeah, yeah. I love that it still feels like it's all still very organic. I mean, there's a lot of radio shows out there that are so highly produced and pre produced and recorded in advance, and you're not hearing things, in real time, and it just feels scripted. And you are none of those things.
It is scripted, and it sickens me. And there are powers that have tried to encourage me to do that over the years, saying it'd be so much easier. You could just go in one day a week and bang it out. And I'm like, bang it out. Do you understand? I love these people. Do you understand? I love my listeners. Like, I want to love them. I want to share with them. How do you bang? And things happen every day, especially with all the craziness going on in the world. You can't bang it out. It's life, it's love, it's living in the moment. So that'll never happen.
That. Well, Delilah, this has truly been a delightful conversation. I feel like I've learned so much about you, and your heart is enormous for other people, for what
God's
you
heart
do.
is enormous. My heart, here's the thing. If people understood that you can be, if you think of blessings or joy as money, and I'm not saying it is money, I'm saying just something tangible, or apples. If every time you felt joy was a delicious ripe apple, you can have bushels of apples every single day, fresh, daily, bushels to give away. Or if you think of it in terms of dollars, which I don't, but I'm just saying, if you think of every time you feel joy as a gold coin, which by the way is over like $3,000 an ounce now, but if you thought of every time I feel joy, happiness as a gold coin, you can have bushels of those at the end of your bed every day when you wake up, if you walk with God and let him guide you. If you don't, if you think you know it all, you got it all figured out and you do it on your own, you're lucky to maybe scrape up one gold coin in your lifetime. Or there is such an abundance of joy and love and laughter available to anybody who wants it. Doesn't matter. Look at Johnny Erickson Tata.
Great example.
Broke her neck as a teenager. The woman bubbles with joy and laughter. She paints with her teeth. She has enriched the lives of thousands upon thousands of people with her music because she lets God work through her. When you're just a vessel, I don't have a big heart. I'm just me. What I have is an amazing God that flows through me like a river. But when you try to be a lake and dam it up, it doesn't flow and it becomes stagnant like the Dead Sea. But when you just open your heart and say, God, work through me, whatever you want me to do today, wherever you want me to go, lead me, whatever you want me to have, whatever you want me to experience, be there with me to get me through it. You can have bushels of joy that you can then just give away.
That's so good. I feel so fired up right now. I just want to go love on somebody and
Go
spread
love someone. When
a
you
little
hug,
positivity.
and just physically, when you hug somebody, and you don't even have to do it like I try to do it via the airwaves. When you embrace somebody in your love and you pray for them and you say, I want God to bless you, I want you to experience God's best, it changes you. It changes you. I'm sure there's a scientific explanation for it, but it changes you. And it's available to anybody who wants it.
That's right. And it's free.
It's free anytime, day or night. Love is available.
Amen. Thank you so much for this and for your time. And happy Mother's Day times 15.
God bless you. Thank you, honey.
Thank you, Delilah. I appreciate it.